Indeed, Raf, Camden's a city that's been through some tough times in recent years. Decades of economic downturn have left it one of the poorest and most dangerous cities in the country. There are some signs of hope, however. There's a new police force in operation and they have been able to reduce the levels of crime. They've also become one of the first police forces in this country to introduce this body camera technology. Their police chief invited us down to the city to spend time on the front line and look at the impact this technology is having on policing in the community. The police force in Camden has actually undergone significant changes over the past few years. It was back in 2013 that the citywide police force was disbanded. That was amid violent crime rates and homicide rates that were really soaring. And at that point, a county police force was brought in. And under their leadership, those rates of homicides and violent crime dropped quite significantly. But amid those improvements, also issues of trust, really. When you have a new police force, it's always difficult to build those relationships. And that's really where these body cameras come in, the idea that by giving them to police officers, you can improve the relationship with the community and hold your police officers to greater account. We met up with Officer Farrell and Officer Bagby in North Camden. It's a district emblematic of the city's struggles.
No more than 4 years ago, this used to be the worst part in Camden City. There were open-air drug market trades and a lot of homicides because drugs bring guns and guns bring drugs. Now, 4 years or so ago, we wouldn't be able to walk this without seeing any type of criminal activity, and unfortunately, there were not a lot of kids playing around. And a lot of people have been coming up to us, grandmothers, mothers, and they're telling us, you know, we're so happy with the job you're doing because now we feel a little bit safer with our children playing around, riding their bicycles.
This focus on community policing hasn't gone unnoticed. President Obama visited Camden last year, calling the city a symbol of promise for the nation. And the hope is this camera technology sets an example nationwide at a time when the relationships between police departments and many of the communities they serve are tense. How big a game changer is it to policing?
I believe it's a very positive tool in the world of policing. Last year, I had some use of force incidents, and this year, I have 0, because if a situation got escalated, I would tell the person or persons, look, I'm filming this entire thing. If you want to put your hands on me, that's fine, but just know that when the time comes and we go to court, everyone's going to see this.
Yep.
And it'll de-escalate the situation.
The use of these body cameras is non-discretionary. The police are required to switch them on as soon as they begin their patrol and then inform civilians that any given incident is being recorded unless it's unsafe to do so. That footage is then archived for 90 days. With any form of surveillance, civil liberties issues arise, and as a result, the police force consulted the American Civil Liberties Union prior to introducing the technology. Before heading down to Camden, we wrote to the ACLU to get their take on the final policy. They commended the force for their outreach, but remained skeptical about what happens to the footage once it's returned to the headquarters. I posed those concerns to the police chief. Members of the public can't view that footage unless they file for a lawsuit, correct? And if so, is that fair? A lot of people don't have the resources to go forward and file that lawsuit, even if they feel like they've been treated unfairly by the police.
So a lot of this is governed also by the Attorney General Directive on body-worn cameras, which means it's universal across the state, and it's for uniformity in how the information will be handled and the like. One of the things that we do is if somebody has a complaint against an officer and they come in, we do review that footage with them. What we're not going to do is just release it to the public. And if there's ever any concern with the footage that they wish to see or they wish to acquire, they don't necessarily even have to go file a lawsuit because they can appeal to the county prosecutor in a process, and then the county prosecutor, who's the chief law enforcement officer of the county, can make a ruling. And the ACLU have concerns that the police officers are able to review that footage before writing their report on what happened out there in the field. Perhaps their perspective of what happened changes based on the footage they've watched. How do you respond to that? Should police be able to have such easy access to the footage afterwards? Well, I think that's a legitimate concern. However, really what we want is the truth of the matter. And in fact, that could be exculpatory information as well. An officer could remember something differently, get back and look at the video footage and say, well, that really didn't occur the way I thought it was. Maybe my emotion played into this, and it could ultimately end up in somebody being released and not being charged.
Chief Thompson held a series of town hall meetings with the community to hear their suggestions before installing these body cameras. We headed back to North Camden to meet with activist Natalie Rivera, who was vocal at those public forums. She's been won over not only by the body cameras, but the efforts of the county force as a whole.
The cameras, I believe, are wonderful. I think it's a great idea. I think it brings another perspective. It brings another opportunity to do community policing correct. And I believe we're a model. I do see the effort with the county metro department with coming to the parks, doing pop-up block parties and interacting with the kids, and just throughout the city at the community centers doing movie nights at the parks. I think it's a peaceful situation now.
That enthusiasm Natalie exudes isn't universally shared. There are elements of the community frustrated that they never had a say in the police takeover. We've come down to Camden High School. We're going to meet with one of the teachers here. His name's Keith Benson. In addition to being a high school teacher, he's also a very vocal community activist. He's been a long-time critic of the police force, and he also doesn't buy this argument that the city officials have put forward that Camden is experiencing this so-called renaissance. So it should be quite interesting to see what he has to say on these new police body cameras.
I think for the public to have greater access to information is potentially good, but the biggest question is what happens after it. If we see police who are acting, out of the realm of what we deem reasonable, and we see non-action come out of what we've all seen as actions of injustice, then that can actually serve to create bigger voids in the relationships between the community and police.
You said back in 2013 the community didn't really get a say when it came to this county police force moving in, but when it came to the adoption of these police body cameras, the police force held a number of community meetings where they welcomed input, opinions from members of the community. What do you make of those meetings?
Well, what I would say, what we consider to be community meetings, what are called community meetings, really are not community meetings.
Why?
Because what happens for community meetings is that, the mayor's friends, the connected politicians' friends, maybe city council family members, or whatever the case may be, or even the elderly, seniors who are aware and get, are abreast of these certain issues, they'll show up to a meeting. But understand that Camden is an extraordinarily young city. So community engagement actually is a community meetings actually going there to them and holding these sort of informational settings. So I would say that the idea of community meetings are contrived in our community at all.
We finished the day back where we begun, in North Camden. School was out, the working day was over, and we spoke to a number of the residents. It was there Keith's criticisms were to an extent supported. You had no idea they had body cameras on?
No, I heard about them, but I didn't know Camden had them.
So you heard about them elsewhere in other cities, but you weren't aware of the camera?
Articles about them and stuff like that.
They've been here for a number of months now. You haven't, when you've been interacting with the police, seen them out in the neighborhood, you haven't seen them sort of carrying them?
I ain't really noticed them. Well, see, I think I knew about them. I just didn't know it was in Camden. I thought it was like in Detroit, Chicago, and stuff like that. I just didn't know it was in Camden.
It's worth noting that Ed, who you heard from there, wasn't alone. We spoke to more than 24 Camden residents that evening, the majority of whom had no idea that the police were now equipped with these body cameras. As New York prepares to follow Camden's example, it seems pretty clear that one of the focuses needs to be making sure that these communities are better informed.